but we might even be live now. I just got to double check on the Facebook page if we actually are live. We might be. If anyone's tuning in, thanks for your patience. Just checking that we are officially live on Facebook and YouTube. It looks like we are. So good. All right, let's get into it. So welcome everybody for another episode of The Wave, Evolving Human Consciousness. So grateful that you decided to touch down and join us tonight. It's gonna be a good one, and I just want to dedicate this episode to the women in my life, to my mother, who's just always been there through me, no matter what the challenges are. I've just always felt her love throughout my life. So thank you so much, Mom, for teaching me how to honor women and honor the feminine within me. And thank you to my sister Selena Whitaker. You're absolutely incredible. You've been such an amazing model in my life at a beautiful, loving family, and just for somebody who's just showing up in the world in a way where you're really like happy, you're expressing your joy, and you're still a super responsible person. So thank you, Selena, and also thank you to my lovely partner, Jennifer Polanski. I can see her right now. I love you, babe. Thank you for teaching me so much about how to honor you. I've learned so much through acknowledging and witnessing you and expressing your needs and wants, and it's really helped me tune into myself and care for myself in deeper and deeper ways. So, and thank you to all the women that are tuning in right now, because we are going to be talking about safe space, and I feel that so relates to women in general, and such a duty for me as a man to be able to honor the feminine, and to be able to continue to listen to how to create and provide safe space. And another big thank you and much gratitude to Melissa, who is our special guest tonight. Just want to say thank you so much for joining us, Melissa. One of, if not my closest brother, who's not actually genetically my brother, Fraser Rishi, recommended you, and he always mentions how you guys have some super deep conversations and they're always very insightful. So I'm going to bring you into the frame right now and say hi and tell us about yourself.
Hi, my name's Melissa Addison-Webster, and I am a social worker and activist and light worker and seeker of greater peace. So I feel really blessed that that Fraser thought of me, really honored, because I have a lot of respect for him and his analysis in different ways. And it's great to meet you, Chris, and to hear about the work that you're doing and the change that you are creating in the world as well.
Thank you for seeing me. that's really appreciated. There's so much about your life that I'm excited to ask you about and dive into, because I know you've done a lot of internal practice, but you've also done a lot of like spiritual activism and very practical, worldly, challenging things that you've taken on. I know one thing you're working with right now is universal basic income, and the anti-poverty work, which really excites me to talk about. Maybe you can just give us a little brief synapse of the work you're doing with that right now.
Yeah, thanks. I am part of an organization that's pushing for a basic income, the Basic Income Network of Peterborough. And we are focusing on pushing the federal government to take a really good look at the ways that a basic income would help in alleviating poverty, reducing the cost of health care, giving women safe access to escape difficult relationships. In the 70s in Manitoba, there was a program that was done, and they saw a decrease in domestic violence by 30%. And I'm a survivor of domestic abuse. And as a survivor, I'm really excited to see how that could change people's lives. So what we want to do is we want to look at the low income cutoff, which is around $2,000. And we want to give everyone $2,000 a month, everyone in Canada. And in my opinion, I believe that if you are already at a certain threshold, once you're making money and you have a job, and you are at a certain threshold, you wouldn't receive the basic income anymore. But if you're below a certain income, then you would receive basic income. And there have been studies all over the world that show that basic income does not decrease people's incentive to work. People are still going out because a lot of people really enjoy work. But many people work 2 or 3 or even 4 part-time jobs and struggle to make ends meet. And we don't need to live in a world like that. So basic income is would be something that could really radically change how our society works. And I'm really excited to think about, you know, sort of challenging the ways right now that consumer capitalism, you know, sort of uses and abuses most people in most ways. So yeah, so I'm really excited to work towards that. And people are seeing how a CERB is something that's, you know, been very, very helpful for people in keeping the economy going. They say that within the next 20 years that 50% of our jobs will be gone due to automation. 50%.
Yeah.
So what will happen with all of those people?
Yeah.
Like, so what will happen? We need to have something that will give people a life of dignity and respect.
That's so good, and it's so true. And I think we all know when we're doing work that we truly feel is serving others, we want to work. You know, it feels really good. And just as you're talking about this, you know, I think about OW. I think about how I think it's even less than $700 or something like that a month. And then I imagine CERB with that $2,000, how when you feel like you got enough where it's like, okay, this actually does cover my rent, my food, and some personal expenses if you're not living right downtown Toronto, but in other areas. And then you actually have the time to consider what I can be doing that feels of service, that actually feels good, you know, to myself or whoever it is. And I think that I know I was on OW once in my life, and I didn't feel like I had any kind of cushion to like relax and be like, okay, let's figure out my life. I felt the exact same, you know, need to get a job and to be on top of things, you know?
Yes. Yes. And those present systems, like the systems connected to social assistance, are really demeaning. Like, it's not very nice. Like, it's very paternalistic. There's a huge surveillance component. You virtually have to empty out all of your savings to be able to even receive assistance. So yeah, it's a real challenge in many ways. So I think that a basic income guarantee would change that and would get rid of a really difficult, you know, situation and system.
Well, I'm excited to ask you a few more questions about that a little later on. And in one of the conversations we had before this, it was neat. I don't know how much that this will happen throughout the show, but how like classism and how different classes creates a lot of the divide. And that's where I see that, yes, there's systemic racism, and yes, there's definitely other issues of like, obviously the indigenous of this land and a lot of discrimination in those ways, but a lot of how kind of most people are being discriminated is relating to classes and just not having access to higher education. But we'll go more into that. I wanted to start off with something fun here that we did last episode that's called the Riptide Round. And it's a good way for people to get to know you because you got to answer questions on the fly. So I'm going to ask you 10 questions. You'll have 3 seconds to respond. And there's only one rule to the game. So I'll ask for your consent for that. And the rule is, if you don't answer within 3 seconds, then I get to ask you to tell us something vulnerable about yourself.
Okay.
You agree?
Yep.
All right, sweet. Okay, so let's start the Riptide round. First question, where were you born?
Peterborough.
Favorite animal?
Horse.
Name one of your all-time favorite movies.
Out of Africa.
Ooh, nice. Out of Africa, I'll have to look that one up. Put into sound what you're feeling right now. That was good. That was really good. Okay, describe your personality in one word.
Feisty.
Ooh, I felt that. Okay, name one of your mentors.
Thich Nhat Hanh.
Beautiful. Excited to ask you some questions about him. Favorite fruit?
Apple.
Nice. What kind of apple?
Delicious.
Ooh, nice. All right. Name one of your all-time favorite books.
Grapes of Wrath.
Oh, you got it. Grapes of Wrath. Beautiful.
Such a beautiful book.
Yeah? I'll have to look into that one too. I have not read it. Name 3 things that you're grateful for.
My parents, my teacher, and my hands.
Okay, we're gonna give you that one. That was right on the dot. Hands. Okay. Beautiful. Nice. And last but not least, name a 5-letter word.
Coca.
Coca, you got it, but it was after the 3 seconds.
No.
So I'm gonna have to ask you to name something vulnerable about yourself.
That's interesting.
Could be a story.
I know something that's I've been scared. Yeah, vulnerability. I have issues with vulnerability because I haven't been in a relationship in like 17 years.
Wow. I feel like I know you just a little bit more.
Yeah. There you go.
So good. Well, the Riptide round is closing down. Waters are getting nice and smooth again.
Great.
Okay. So first and foremost, I would love to really hear about what got you in this journey of light work. What really started this journey for you?
When I was 22, I had been out with a friend and we had been drinking beer and smoking pot. And then I lost control of my vehicle that I was driving home, and I sustained a C7 spinal cord injury. And C7 is like right on the it's right on the edge of where like you could still have function with your fingers or you couldn't. So that's why I'm thankful for my hands. So yeah, so I had that injury and I wasn't in a very balanced space. I dropped out of high school and like was not, really at my best and was in a very controlling and abusive relationship. And then I was all alone in this room when I was trying to go through my rehabilitation, and I was like having problems with my relationship and problems with my bladder and problems with my bowels, and I had a frozen shoulder and all of these things. And I was like, how can anyone survive, like go through this much? How can anyone survive this much suffering? Like I just questioned. And then all of a sudden I heard, there is a purpose. There is a purpose. And I was like looking around the empty room going, who said that? And then I was like, I said to myself, I was like, I'm not telling my psychiatrist that. Now I'm hearing voices. Whoa. I didn't even tell my partner because I was like, he'd be like, oh, really? Now you're hearing voices, are you? Okay. So anyway, so that was very interesting. And for me, I was like, what is the purpose? Who said that? Whose voice was that? And it was a very interesting kind of draw for me. And I started receiving craniosacral therapy after I left my abusive relationship. And I really was struck by the profound nature of how healing it was. So that sort of started my connection with the light. And I started meditating with the person who's actually my friend, Lily Swanson. I started meditating with her, and I studied polarity therapy and craniosacral therapy, and that's kind of how I became a light worker and how I sort of got into this spiritual path, because I was really curious. I used to hang out with this fellow, and he used to go to a Hindu ashram in British Columbia, Yashodhara. He lived there for a while, and I would always hang out and meditate and chant and do things like that. And I said to myself one day, I was like, I wonder if I have a Hindu path or a Buddhist path, because I'm really drawn to Buddhism. And then my friend walked out of the house at the time and he was like, oh, I just got this pamphlet for this new Buddhist temple in the mail. And I thought you might be interested in it. And I was like, well, thank you, universe. That's very clear. Obviously, I'm on a Buddhist path. And then eventually I was able to find my teacher through sort of I had some sort of very auspicious things that happened. And I was able to find him later on. So that's kind of how it all started.
Wow. Wow. And that was Thich Nhat Hanh.
Yeah, that was Thich Nhat Hanh.
Thich Nhat Hanh.
Because one day I was just popping in to see someone who was renting space in my house, and I was looking in this one room, and there were these 3 calligraphies, and it said, "This is it. I have arrived. I am home. Peace is every step." And I was like, whoa, felt very, very profound to me. And then a number of months later, I was visiting a friend in Halifax, and he said, oh, there's this cool activist guy. You probably would really like him. And he handed me a copy of the Shambhala Sun, and Thich Nhat Hanh was on the cover. And I opened up the magazine, and it was right to the same calligraphy. This is it. I have arrived. I am home. Peace is every step. And I was like, oh man, I just saw those calligraphies. And I was like, okay, this is really interesting. And then just a few months later, he was opening a monastery in New York State. And then I went to the monastery, and, I was like, what's with this guy, and he's like such a huge man in spiritual realms. And he's one of the most well-known Buddhist teachers on the planet. And he's just this very small little person, right? He's this little man. And so I was always like, wonder what this guy is all about, and, sort of things. And so then I was sitting, and we were all waiting mindfully, breathing with our hands, sort of bowing in respect as he was walking in with his entourage. And he was about 10 feet away from me. And my heart chakra shot open into this vast ocean of white light, and was just like, bing, 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 bing. And I was like, our hearts met. That's how I knew he was my teacher, because our hearts met. And then I took something called the 5 mindfulness trainings. And I don't know who saw it or who, but I received the Dharma name, Boundless Light of the Heart. So somebody saw what I was feeling, and it was, yes. And then ever since then, I've just been a huge devotee of Thich Nhat Hanh.
Wow. I can feel the vibes of this story, especially when you mentioned that heart-opening experience. Like, oh my goodness. Yeah, wow. Thank you for sharing that. And it's clear, if you're feeling a vibration like that, there's no other choice. Like, this is it. Like, this is it.
Yeah.
So auspicious.
It's so, and you have interesting things. I call them heart twingles. I would go and see Ty. I flew to France for Christmas one year and stayed in Plum Village for 3 weeks. And I would the one time I was on retreat with him, and he walked by me, and I felt this, like, it felt like my heart was wiggling but twinkling at the same time. And I was like, what is this? So it would like twinkle and wiggle, and then it would happen. And then like 2 seconds later, I'd be bawling. And it happened twice at this retreat. And this woman came up to me and she goes, you got a blessing. And I was like, what are you talking about? She was like, when he walked by you and then you started bawling, he was giving you a healing in your heart. And so I started calling them heart twingles, because there's a twinkle and a wiggle. So it's a twingle. So he would give heart twingles. Every time I saw him, I would like feel my heart, and I'd be like, okay, here we go. He's going to remove some suffering. And I would bawl my eyes out. Like, he would just clear my heart. It was amazing. Yeah.
Oh, it's so palpable what you're speaking. That's incredible. And for anyone who doesn't know this man, I would highly suggest looking him up. I was looking, because I knew he wrote a lot of books. I looked him up to look at all the books he wrote. It was almost countless. I think there was like over 30 books. And you're sharing his type of like the activism work and like how much he applies these spiritual principles to seemingly everything. Just before we go into that, if we can just hold for one moment, just because I really want to honor you and your journey. And I know it's been so long since that car accident, but I just kind of want to ask you, like, that must have been a very painful experience. I'm not sure, but I can just imagine how challenging and how painful that was. And if maybe there's something in that pain and that experience that maybe you can go into it a little bit more to just share with some of the viewers, because I know myself, I've dealt with chronic pain, and I'm sure many that are watching have dealt with some really deep pain and suffered through it at times. So if there's something you could share relating to that, that would be beautiful.
Yeah, I live with chronic pain from my injury as well. And but I think I think the emotional pain is the hardest part. Physical pain is one thing, but emotional pain is something else. And I didn't remember when I had the accident. Thankfully, my mind kind of blocked that out. And then I got to the hospital, and it was very interesting because I called my partner at the time and I said, Greg, I'm going to be home in like 15 minutes, preheat the oven. I'm going to cook some chicken, because I had chicken defrosting. And so then as soon as I woke up in the hospital, I was like, where's Greg? Where's Greg? And Greg came, and he was like, and I looked at him and I said, what did you do with my chicken? Of all things. Like, I was like all worried about my chicken. Like, you know, that's like such a mother hen kind of situation.
It so is.
And so anyway, so then I said to the doctor, I was like, what's my diagnosis? And the doctor, who wasn't very balanced, it was interesting because it happened right outside of an Indigenous reserve in rural Alberta, central rural Alberta. And I have blonde hair right now, but at the time I had dark hair, like high cheekbones, and really like pretty dark skin at the time, because it was in June. And I don't know if he thought that I was just like some drunken Indian or what, but he just looked at me and he said, you've broken your neck and you'll never walk. That's what he told me. I was like, dude, man, and it was interesting because I started to cry enormously.
Well,
and
yeah.
he even hold my hand. He wasn't even allowed to touch me. And I was just like, oh man, it was I can even feel how tender it is still in my heart right now, and anyway, so it was very interesting to sort of have that like level, because, in my opinion, I think like from a trauma-informed approach, like I understand when I have to give people difficult news, how you want them to be in a certain safe container. Like as a social worker, right? You think you need to have a container. And I didn't have that. And he was just, like I say, maybe it was a form of racism. I'm not sure, but I always wonder about that. I'm always really curious about that.
Well, I'm glad we can send some love to that situation right now, and that you're feeling that and sharing that with us, because that is so challenging, and I think that's a lot of the emotional pain that we hold is from those incidents, is of being in our most vulnerable state, and then someone just being really blunt and oh my God, and
yeah, very challenging. Very challenging.
So how did you move through finding out that information? Like, how did you get to a point where it was like that you accepted this and it was no longer, say, I don't know, a burden or like a bad thing? Yeah.
That's a good question. I think I started to see the gifts of it once I got out of my relationship, and I was like, I wonder if I still walked, if I would ever have left this person. And I started to see that, and I like went to university, and I've gone on and gotten 2 degrees and like done a lot of interesting things and traveled and done all of those things. So I started to see like what the blossoming part, but something very interesting happened, because I'm a Capricorn, and we have a really interesting relationship to work. So much of our identity is connected to work. And so instead of being able to sit with my pain, I just was like working constantly, because it was too painful to like sit in it and feel it. And I was going to graduate school at York University. I was doing a master's at York, and I was driving and I changed lanes quickly, and someone was at a stop sign and they didn't see me change lanes, and they pulled out from the stop sign and they drove into my van. And it was on Thich Nhat Hanh's 80th birthday.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow.
It's before I had met him. And then I had this, like, probably about, people would say I had like a major depressive episode, but I probably had like 8 or 9 months where I was lucky if I got out of bed to brush my, I was like, a successful day as if I brushed my teeth. But I just had to grieve and like mourn all of the loss and so much of my life, right? And how it had changed. And I always joked, I was like, I knew Zen was strict, but I never knew it was that strict. You know, like, can you imagine? Smash. So anyway, it ended up like transforming my heart in these incredible ways. And I was able to, you know, find my teacher. And then I was like, I like being in university because it's a huge ego thing. And if you can work hard and are intelligent, you can have these spaces where, you know, you're really, you know, from an ego perspective, it's like just amazing because you can build it up in these huge ways. And then it was like, no, you're not here to build your ego. You're not here to, you know, do a PhD. You're here to share love and to share your light. So, you know, I didn't go back to graduate school. I became a social worker. You know, I did all of those sorts of things instead. So, yeah, good things can come from challenging times.
Wow, that's incredibly inspiring, and that's really why I asked that question, because I'm feeling a lot more of the challenge relating to that. And you're an amazing woman. That's so incredible. Like,
you know what Amma says? She
what?
says there are no such things as accidents. There are only invisible gifts of grace from the divine. That's what Amma says. Yeah, yeah. I was like, yeah, no kidding. Thank you, Amma.
Thank you for that. And it's a beautiful segue then with your talking about social work. And you told me earlier that Thich Nhat Hanh actually taught social workers. So maybe that's a good segue to talk about some of these real practical things that he was offering, what you've learned, and how you've applied these things in your life.
Yeah, so Thich Nhat Hanh is the father of engaged Buddhism. When the bombs were falling, he was like, why are we sitting and meditating in the temples in Vietnam? He said, we need to be amongst the people, helping the people. So he started the School of Social Work, and he would go out, he would train these people to be social workers, and they would go out into the communities and help people. And the communities would get bombed, and he'd say, rebuild the huts. And the communities would get bombed, and he'd say, rebuild the huts, you know, and like something like 6th or 7th time they were bombed. And somebody came to him and they were like, are we really going to rebuild? Because we're just going to get bombed again. And he said, you have to build again because you can't lose hope. You can't lose hope. So he did that kind of work. And then he worked as a peace organizer and an activist. And he has a wonderful way of saying things. He says, there's no way to peace. Peace is the way. So he did a lot of work in the United States with peace activists who he said many of them weren't very peaceful, you know, because they were very frustrated with the United States. And so he never chose a side. He just wanted there to be peace. And he was speaking out against the war. And so then the government of Vietnam said, you can't come back. And he was exiled for almost 40 years for the work that he did. Yeah, 40 years.
40 years.
40 years, yeah.
So where was he living during that time?
He was in, he said he dreamed of home every single night. This might make me cry. And he was just so alone. And he said that he was a bee without a hive. So then he had to build hives as he went. And so he had to make community as he was in the United States. So he was, so he lived in the United States for a while and was doing all of this work as an organizer. And he taught at Cornell and he taught Buddhism at different places. And then Vietnam had been colonized by the French, and he was actually there during the war when the French were kicked out. And France said, you can come and live here. So he first he lived in Paris, and it was much too busy. It triggered too much of the trauma from the war. So then they had a little community called Sweet Potato, and then they got too many people, and then they moved, and they ended up creating something called Plum Village. And he has, I think that there's 4 or 5 little hamlets. So they're like little separate communities that are all part of Plum Village in the south of France.
Wow.
And that's where he ended up. And, it was interesting because war brought 2 incredible people, the Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and Thich Nhat Hanh, to us. And they changed things in incredible ways. The way that they've able to be, they've brought mindfulness to the West has been very, very good. So it's interesting to see how, as challenging as the war was, it's been a huge gift for many of us. And I feel very, thankful for the ways that they have always advocated for love and compassion and understanding, and created a more mindful world.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's really, really something to live by. I just love that. It's like peace is right now. It's not something that we even necessarily need to work towards. It exists right now, and we can live in that. And it's something I can remind myself every time I get frustrated about whatever this or that thing and try to fight against it, and just realize that if I want peace and harmony, then I gotta tune into that right now, and I can speak from that place, I can act from that place, I can be silent in that place, Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, so you mentioned that he did train social workers. What was that for? What was that all about?
No, I worked as I studied and became a social worker. And yeah, so it's a very interesting, it's a complex kind of trade, I guess. It's not easy in some ways, but yeah, it's a very engaging process to be able to be working towards, social change on an individual, but, a broader level as well. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh, I was actually, I thought that Thich Nhat Hanh trained social workers, or.
Oh, yes, sorry, he did. He trained social workers to help during the war. So he did that. He was, they had a school for social work to be able to create so that all of these people could get an understanding and go out. He had a really good analysis. He was living in a very poor area, and he was in Vietnam, and he was offered an air conditioner because it was very, very hot in Vietnam. And the last thing he wanted to do was to take the air conditioner, because he didn't want to seem any different from any of the poor people who couldn't afford an air conditioner. So he was like, no, I'm not going to take this air conditioner. I'm okay. I want to be able, like he is a really good analysis that way. He has a very interesting analysis. I don't think he would identify as a Marxist himself, but he has a really strong anti-capitalist lens that he sort of views the world through, and understands class and privilege and all of those things in a really wonderful way. Mm-hmm.
Well, if he was teaching social workers, then most definitely. And I feel like this ties into safe spaces so much. Like I have a social work background as well, and I just have so much respect for social workers and like the frontline social workers, because you're dealing with minorities, you're dealing with people that have been forgotten by the system, forgotten by their family or friends, outcasted in particular ways, people that have just met unfortunate circumstances relating to how the system is set up, and they're not being either not knowing the resources, or they're simply not being resources. And that's also something social workers do, is create those things that the public needs when they realize, oh my God, like this resource center doesn't exist, where we help people, find jobs with their resumes, cover letters, what they need to be prepared. Like that, social workers actually create whatever it is, whether it be like you're talking about an employment resource center, or a homeless shelter, that they're a part of creating those things, and also working, needing like counseling skills and whatnot to work with people that are many times coming out of or are directly in a traumatic situation. So in combination with the light work you do, I would love to hear actually a little bit about that before we move forward. I know you run something called, it's the Pearl Center.
Yeah, I have a holistic healing center that I run. I have a separate section in my home, and the Pearl Center focuses on awakening who you truly are. So that's connecting people with their, larger S self. And so we offer like meditation classes, full moon ceremonies, individual sort of, counseling that's focused on, finding more peace in different ways. And we also offer, I do like hands-on healing that I've studied different things. I've studied in a Peruvian tradition. I've studied with people from Zimbabwe, lots of different spaces. So I integrate earth-based teachings into how people are able to be in the world and how the earth can be quite healing, because originally we were all earth-based beings. It's just that Christianity and all of these other, systems, certain systems of oppression have taken us off the land and disconnected us in different ways. So I'm really interested in focusing on ways we can reconnect with the land and how that can be really healing for us.
So good. Yeah. That's sovereignty. And I feel so many of us have become not realizing the level of dependency on the system that very, very slowly we've been willing to compromise certain rights, or not knowing even where our food comes from, not even asking questions about, how are we receiving all these things? And obviously now that we're in the age of information, we're realizing how much militaries have gone over to other places in the world and taken their resources, set up, I don't want to go too deep into it, but set up puppet governments, set up whatever they can to extract resources from other countries, and then exploit the people there and the workers. And and that gives us a bit of a higher quality of living in certain ways here in North America. And I'm very aware of it. And I'm very aware of how many here still are affected by different levels of kind of the same system of being able to almost just make some humans like their life doesn't matter as much.
I think that's very poignant right now, because we're looking at how migrant workers are actually quite essential. We have this like certain level of disposability about migrant workers, right? And we actually now know they are highly essential. Like, I'm really interested to see how the food chain is going to shut down.
Tell me more about this.
Well, I really feel that because of COVID and the way things are changing, especially down around Windsor and all of these places where there's a high proportion of migrant workers, I really think like many of them haven't been able to work, or farms are being shut down because of COVID, because they have terrible living conditions, just terrible living conditions. And they're just like packed in like, I don't know, just like sardines into these spaces. So now I don't think we're going to be able to have the same food system that we've been relying on for the last number of years, because we don't have sovereignty, because we're relying on foreign labor. And all of those people, I have a friend, Louise, who's been here for, over 2 decades, but he could never get permanent residency because he's just seen as disposable. And that's really quite sad. Very, very sad,
Yeah, which has created a lot of like human rights issues, why there's need for unions and all those types of things. And there's so much we're not aware of. And it seems like that's on purpose. These things aren't going to be advertised as much in the media because, you know, certain people gain more from these things not being known. You know, you can have more of a monopoly on things, and until there's enough people that are crying out injustice, things won't change. And it seems like that's kind of how the system is. And it's kind of silly to be at a point where it's like we're always having to like almost like beg and plead when we see that something needs to be changed, when in reality the government should want to do that for us. So, you know, it's very interesting times, because I feel like either the system that we're in is going to have to change drastically in certain ways, or new systems, it feels like, are going to be created. I know a lot of my friends are doing like learning about sustainable farming, going to different parts in the world, bringing that information back and getting those things started up here. So it's very exciting to see people doing this, because we need it. Without this kind of liberation, we won't have the courage to move away from the system if it does get to a point where it's just like really brutal for everybody. But it is brutal for a lot of people already, and we're just not hearing about it.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'd be curious, your anti-poverty work, like what you've kind of come across that's along those lines. Like, have you noticed there being more areas of discrimination that people might not be as aware of?
Well, I think I don't think we culturally can ever accept people who have had to rely on social assistance or are relying. People are like the scummiest of the scummiest if they're relying on social assistance, and it can't be fixed. I just think it can't be fixed. And I think that as much as I honestly believe the only way that we're going to survive all of this would be the complete destruction of consumer capitalism, that if we're stuck with this system as it is right now, I think that a basic income guarantee would be the only way to move forward in some way that could be slightly rebalancing, because capitalism is inherently structured in a way, and especially when we look at the way that neoliberalism has been permeating through our systems, you know, especially since the 1980s, and what that has done to social safety nets, to unions, to wages, to the way that globalized industry has changed. It's enormous. And so unfettered capitalism is not lifting anybody up, and nothing is trickling down because it's not helping, right? It's not structured for that to happen. And you even think about COVID, the way that all of these people have gained, the 1% have increased their wealth, I think by 35% in this short period of time. That's terrible.
It's frightening.
It's frightening. And you know what? I think it's immoral that we have billionaires. Straight up. You just need to share. It's immoral. You just have to share. And that's the biggest, weirdest thing. It's that is the only thing that I'm really interested in thinking about, is ultimately we're all human beings. And I think COVID has taught that we need to share. We need to be interdependent. In Buddhism, in my realm, we call it, we interbe with everything. And we need community. We need people. Rugged individualism isn't helping people. So we need a sense of community, and we need a sense of love and respect. And it just comes down to, you have to share. Don't be greedy, and you just share. That's it. And when my brother used to go to Beavers, their saying was my mom and my brother and I would be fighting about something, and my mom would say, "What do they say at Beavers?" And then you'd have to say, "Sharing, sharing, sharing." That was the Beaver theme.
Yeah.
You got to share. So
100%.
Yeah. So anyway, deep breath.
It's funny. I said that to my partner today, and thank you for sharing and sharing so emphatically, because I said that exact thing. I'm like, there is no need for anybody to be a billionaire. That's even $1 billion, to have $1 billion, that should be mandatory, because for one, they're taxed actually less across the board. Yeah. They've shown, I think it's 29%, the average person, they're in the 27% category. it's like a certain number of that should just go back to like community building or just something very fundamental. It's like, it's crazy. And that's why we're seeing now, like you're saying, that's only increased by like 30%, the billionaires. If the gap keeps going this way, which it has, which has been continually going this way for a long while now, things are only going to get worse. And what's going to be, to me, what's going to be covered in everybody's eyes until it's too late is that even the middle class is going to start really struggling, and it's going to just be, everyone's just going to kind of hit that point where they're like, oh fuck, and now it's kind of scrambling, when it's like, okay, well, why don't we tune into that now? Let's create more community. Let's figure out ways that we could live together in a way that we are more sustainable. And I think the first thing is starting with food, because that's the biggest thing. Once you know you have your food, and especially if you have like plots of land, or even just enough friends with plots of land that like have really good access to water, and maybe like bigger areas of farming, then you don't necessarily need much else. I know we're used to having a lot more, but we need access to clean water and to good soil to grow food. And from there, we don't necessarily need anything else besides people.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you. I think food sovereignty is something that's really important. I have a fair chunk of land that I'm like growing, like I'm breaking down sections of it to be able to have more gardens and all of those things. So yeah, I think it's really, really important. But you know, the decimation of the middle class has been happening for quite some time, that we have a disappearing middle class, right? And then we have just, it's frightening to think about the ways, like you say, when are people going to wake up? When are people going to like understand the structures, and how will people sort of create a little more consciousness? I think there's more things that are shifting, like down in the States, like people are like, oh, wow, yeah, we have like this historic system that is racist, and this is what it's done. And we still see how we have a racist society, and people are starting to question that. I hope some people, I think it's very divisive because people have these blinders that they wear, like, if they're a Democrat or a Republican, and then they can't sort of see beyond that, unfortunately. But yeah, we'll just have to see what will happen, because it would be interesting to see how much autonomy we would have if we witnessed the fall of the United States. That would be interesting.
It'd be very, very interesting. Just to kind of finish up on this topic, for anyone listening now, I highly recommend the podcast Liberty on the Land. My good friend and brother Brian Hardy, who's actually on episode 5 of this, recommended it, and I'm just blown away from one main guy that they have on the podcast right now. His name is Kevin Annett, who actually was him and not that many people basically got Trudeau to the point to admit that this land that we live on was basically, the society and culture was created on mass genocide of Indigenous people. And like, just to give people a bit of the taste of what Kevin Annett was able to do, because this guy has really worked on another level of understanding how government works, and how that's something called common law, which means even like the people can work with the justice system in ways that we didn't even know of before. And that it was really only, he was saying it was probably like maybe 20, 30 people, like groups of people, that got to the point to get Trudeau to admit that genocide. And it's even talking about these like, what were they called? The schools. What is it? They have a certain term
residential schools.
Residential schools. They're like, they weren't schools. They were entrainment camps. Like, they weren't schools at all. They were literally abusing, raping, and killing these kids. And I won't go into it anymore, but I'm like, you've been bringing out some big doses of like of reality here. And I feel like we really need to get clear on these things, because the universe, like everything, what goes around always comes around, and this isn't done with the indigenous people. Their culture was absolutely destroyed, and they're like, many are still in shambles from it, and it's like, it needs to be more than just acknowledged. Like, we need to do something about it, you know, and we have an opportunity to still learn, because we actually do have people living that are indigenous, that the lineage is still there, which is so cool, because there's so many, like, you know, I know certain ways that this happened in like Europe and other countries that were decimated, that they don't have anyone living anymore, you know?
Yeah, and I think like the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and all of those things have been able to say, these are the issues, right? Like, if everybody, like, does everybody know the treaty territory that they're in, right? Or like, do they know, like, what treaty territory do you live in? Or who were the indigenous people who lived in your area, or who do still live in your area, or all of these different things. Have you ever been to a powwow? Like, things like that. There's actual tangible things that non-indigenous folks can do to get a better connection and to become better allies. Yeah, and there's a lot of work to be done with that, a lot.
Yeah, very much. Well, speaking on that, then let's acknowledge the land that we're meeting on, even though it's over Zoom. I know we're both in Toronto actually right now. But that we are meeting in this traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, such as the Inuit and the Métis people. So that's
them
the land we're on.
Now.
Who's calling?
That's them calling. Oh, and they're like, thank you. You did a land acknowledgement. Thank you. Like, oh, okay. Funny.
And I think that's a great. Sorry, go on.
No, I think it's really important. Yeah, that we know those things, right? And that we have those connections.
Yeah, most definitely. So we're talking about safe spaces, and I think that's one. I know a lot of people who run events in Toronto. I do as well. Things aren't happening right now. Run one thing called the Temple Groove at the Hare Krishna Temple, and every other Sunday. And I think it's beautiful to start off by acknowledging the land in that way, and then also guidelines of how to create safe space for everyone to feel comfortable, to open their hearts more, and to be vulnerable. So I was just wondering, actually, just more on a personal level, for you, what helps create safe space for you, and whether you want to talk about what doesn't feel safe or what does is up to you. But I'd really love to know, as a woman, what helps to create safe space for you at an event.
Well, I think it's complex. Like, if you're thinking about if it's like a women or folks who identify as women only space, there would be certain things that I would have in the space, and then if it included, you know, just anybody, then there would be other things within the space. But something I would say is, like, people have in the past, like, if I've had movement classes or things like that, certain things around respecting boundaries when it comes to bodily, you know, connections in different ways. I would want there to be a space that has kind of like encourages anti-oppressive ideas and thoughts, and that if you're saying things that are racist or homophobic or transphobic or ableist in all of these ways, that you'll get called out on it, and that sort of language isn't welcome. And not in like a condemning way, but like, if somebody's saying something, you know, and you can be able to say, you know, like, dude, man, you can't say that. It doesn't make me feel safe if you're bashing women or doing something like that. So having that kind of like inclusive language is something that's really, really, I think that's really important. What are other things that makes spaces safe? I think often I will say, like, if we're interacting or having challenges in different ways, that we're using I statements. So like, I wouldn't be like, Chris, you did this and you did this and it made me, feel like this. I was like, when this happened, I felt like this, not like, Chris, you made me feel this way. So yeah, using I statements is really, really helpful. And I think, like in certain conscious spaces, it's an interesting balance, right? Because I don't know, if I'm going to something, it's okay if I meet with someone and I'm like, oh, I really like that person, but I'm not like necessarily consciously going out to hook up. Right? Like, so it's like, what's your intention to be in this space? Am I going into this intention, my intention into this space is to raise my vibration and to share this love, this, what the Buddhists call like the bodhicitta, this like unconditional love, this awakened heart with other people and build on that energy. Okay, then that's what my intention is. It's not there to like hook up and get down, right? Like, that's it. It's just like, okay, that's what I'm doing. And I want people to be able to have space where they can like date or, find connection in spiritual community. But there's like a time and space for that, in my opinion. And a lot of the spiritual gatherings that I'm organizing, it's like, that ain't the space. That's not the time, to sort of have that intention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel you. And I think that's something that probably a lot of men don't realize, when it's like you're having this space in public, there is both sexes there, and there might be many people, but you're still wanting to really tune in. You're wanting to open your heart, and you want to be in a space where you don't feel like you need to in any way have to defend or protect.
Yeah. So kind of like laying that out, being like asking people before they come, what's your intention? If it's this, this, and this, if it's to build, a space of love, a space of trust, a space of like, intimacy, that's like a spiritual intimacy, right? Then that's something different, right? As opposed to, like, to be able to have those spaces, like you say, where people can be vulnerable and they can do those sorts of things. I think you have to like consciously set it out.
Yeah, definitely. And there's many dance parties that I've been a part of here, and different situations that would be more open to, to flirting, or someone maybe interested in something potentially more than friendship. And I think that's where things get a little more challenging, and where there always needs to be consent. And I feel whenever there's any level of unsureness or doubt, it's always better to ask, especially when you're coming into a place that's considered conscious or spiritual, because just that is already an invitation, not just for men and women, but I just want to more be especially talking about women, is like there is still a level of discernment that is needed no matter what space that you go into when it's that kind of setting. Is there any advice that you could give to women that might be a bit younger, or maybe potentially coming from more of out of a traumatic situation, so might be more likely to maybe make a decision that was a little less discerning, could maybe be in more of an emotional space? Would there be any kind of advice that you could give?
Trust your intuition, and who cares if somebody doesn't like you? I've been in spaces where I'm like, oh, if I say something, the person won't like me. Who cares? Put your intuition and your body first. We're like programmed to not do that. We're socialized not to do that. So put your intuition and your body first. And who cares if somebody's like upset that you tell them to back off? That's their problem, not yours. Yeah.
That's incredible advice. That's so good.
That's for everybody, Chris. That's for like, that's for like non-binary people. That's for everybody. Go with your intuition. Trust your intuition.
That's so beautiful. So I know since I've started doing that in my life consistently, it's like I really learn who I'd want to be around by their reaction to my no or setting a boundary. Because I've learned, especially in certain periods, if I'm even a little bit unsure about something, I'm going to say no at first. It doesn't mean that I can't turn into a yes, but it's like it's always smarter to start as a no, and then even a few more no's, and even taking a bit more of your space, just so, you know, so that even if you're not even that unsure of a person, they could even seem like they're really, but you just don't want to connect in that way. You know, that's, people can take things personal, but it's not relating to you. You're allowed to set your boundaries.
Exactly. Behind every no is a yes. So if I say no to this person, I'm saying yes to myself. So you have to remember that behind every no is a yes.
Wow.
And to own those yeses, and for those yeses to be okay. So I find that very helpful.
You rock, Melissa. That's amazing.
Yes.
That's such great advice. I feel my heart so much right now. Oh, wow. So we are at about 9 o'clock right now, but I just want to open the space if there's anything else that you would really like to share or go into tonight.
I don't really think so. I think I just want everyone to to think about, I'm really excited the way COVID has slowed everything down. And it's been really hard in some ways for people, but think about the gifts of the times that we're all able to have a deeper spiritual practice, and how that's a really beautiful thing. And I've met with a lot of very busy people, but I always say, even if you set your alarm 5 minutes early, and then your alarm goes off, and then you set an alarm for 5 minutes later, and you lay in bed and you watch your breath for 5 minutes, your day will change. If you consistently do that. That's how my meditation practice started. I would get up, I would light a candle, I would watch my breath for 5 minutes. It grew to 10 minutes, and then up to 45 minutes. And then it was like, okay, whenever I needed it, I had built up a mindfulness muscle. And so then as soon as I needed my mindfulness muscle, it was right there. So anybody can do it. People will say, oh, my mind is too much. And I was like, no, anybody can harness the monkey mind. You just have to be disciplined and focused, and try and have a community that you sit with. That's something that's very helpful as well. So I'm really thankful for Chris and for the water spirits of this space, and for all the Indigenous people here in Toronto, as we're both in Toronto. And I'm thankful that Chris, that you're doing this work, and the other wave people, and how you're trying to create, more peace and consciousness in the world. And hopefully we'll get to meet one day face to face.
Oh, we will. There's no doubt about it. And just to say one thing about that spiritual practice, set an alarm, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, even if it's just 5 minutes, even if your mind is going off the whole time, but if you just keep bringing your attention back to your breath, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you keep bringing your attention back to your breath, or back to your body, or zooming in on places that are painful or things like that, it will change your day. It will change your day.
Yes. So Melissa, I would love for people to know how to contact you, if there's a website or anything like that. I'll definitely make sure to put it in the comments on the Wave Evolving Human Consciousness page. So check it out there, but please share it now.
I'm building a new website as we're speaking right now, Chris. It should launch in a few days, but the pearlcenter.ca, and Pearl Center is the British spelling, CENT, or CENTRE, center, the pearlcenter.ca. And I'm on Instagram with the Pearl Center, and also on Facebook with the Pearl Center, but I'll forward the links and we'll go from there. And I do online work, distance work. I'm in the city, so I work in Toronto as well. And we just all want to awaken who we truly are.
Well, I can tell we'll get some serious heart expansion working with you, because I already have, just from being with you today. I'm incredibly grateful. I feel very blessed, Melissa. You're a super special human being.
Thank you.
Well, then this concludes, and this actually concludes our first season. This is episode 10, so we're going to close the book on this season. We'll be back again in most likely a month or two. We're still figuring it out. A bit of a new format for season 2. We're definitely going to keep the Riptide round, bring in more fun. We're just trying to set things up so that we can get to know our guests as best as we absolutely can, for them to feel super safe and comfortable to express everything, like the vulnerabilities, their deep dark secrets, the things that, you know, that we don't always see when you see a person that you're like, wow, they're successful. Wow, like this is, I would love to be in that situation. Well, I want to open up like how these people got there, like who inspires you, and like how they got to that point, and to see that they're just as human as you are, even in the spot that they're in right now. And you know, that's the beauty of life, is that you can still be going through all the things and still be happy, and still be following what truly matters to you, and still pursuing your dreams. That there's no prerequisite, and you could be going through any amount of emotions, any amount of things. So I'm excited to welcome you back for season 2, but the wave has touched down for now. Sending you a whole lot of love, sending you much love, Melissa. Sending a ton of love to my mom, Sandy Whitaker. Much love to Selena Whitaker, and much love to my partner, Jennifer Polanski. Again, thank you so much. You women are amazing, and you make me better. So I love y'all. We'll see you again soon.